Hello ladies and gentlemen, Jake here. Today we're going to be going over the basics of triggers in Hammer. So essentially what a trigger is a giant box or marker that tells the engine when the player gets to this area, do something. So triggers can have a set of inputs and they can have a set of outputs, but mostly they have outputs. And those outputs can go to many things. I've got a dynamic prop set up here, but they can go to dynamic props, they can go to physics props, they can go to lights, anything really that has anything that's capable of receiving some type of input. A trigger can do stuff to it. So what I've got here is a basic trigger that sets up a door. So when the player walks into this box, the door will open. So this door here is just a basic dynamic prop with a basic world model that's sort of compatible with what I want it to do. And then that model has, a certain amount of animations. It has a close animation, and then it has an open animation, and then, it's got its idles and whatnot. And I've given it a name, and this is kind of important because in order for a trigger to target an entity, that entity has to have a name. So I've called this door 1 in a rather giant stroke of creativity and imagination. And so now when this trigger is triggered, it knows to target door 1. Now, the nice thing about this is that you can have like multiple lights. Like if you have a bunch of lights in a room, you can name them all like light 1. And then you can have a central trigger to trigger them all at once, and they'll all be triggered at the same time. But then if you want different lights, then you can have multiple outputs to different lights, each with a name. And it's like light 1, light 2, light 3, etc. It's okay if that sounds a little confusing. Triggers are tricky. Triggers are very tricky. So what this will do in game is I'll walk through it, the door will open, and then it waits 2 seconds, and then the door closes. So how we're going to set that up is I'm going to go ahead and delete this trigger, and we're going to create a new trigger. So in order to create a trigger, just go ahead and select your brush tool and create a brush that's roughly in the area that you want your trigger to be. So roughly about the size, I guess, for this type of door. And then go ahead and create the brush. And the texture that you're going to want to find is just type in trigger into your filter for your texture, and then you find this one right here. And that'll essentially give it an invisible texture, and so that tells the engine, don't render this, with the usual physics. Don't give it collision or anything. Don't let the player see it. So once you've got your brush all set up, then you're going to want to select it and hit Control T, and that's going to bring up the properties menu, and it's going to make it an entity. And so what we want to do is change its class to trigger underscore multiple. So that'll create a trigger with multiple inputs and outputs. And so now we've got a little blue dot in the middle, and that tells us that it's a trigger. So if we go over to the outputs tab, we have like a little chart here with some output where we can list our outputs to different entities. So we want to hit, let's see, where is it? Add. And that'll create a new output. And you can see we got the little output symbol here. And we want this output to be named on start touch all. So that essentially means when the trigger starts, which is when it's touched, then it will touch all of the entities listed here. So we want to target the entity named door 1. Now the handy thing is that it's got this little dropper tool here, so I can hit that and then just click on door 1 and it automatically drops it in there. And then what we want this input to do, so via this input, we want to set the animation for the door to open. And we want it to, if you can hit this if you only want it to fire once. But in this case, we would like it to be able to fire multiple times. So we're going to hit apply, and now that is active. So we want to add another trigger to close the door. So we're going to hit copy and paste. And that will just duplicate the trigger right then and there. But instead of that, we want to set via this animation close. And then we're going to make it after a delay of 2 seconds. So that way the player has time to walk through the door. And so we're going to hit apply, and then that will apply it to the trigger. And now we have a trigger that will open the door and close the door. And so yeah, that is the basics of triggers. Like I said, they're kind of tricky, so it's usually a good idea to play around with them and just see what they do. That's how I learned most of what I know. So anyways, I'll see you guys next time.